They cannot talk about these things because they just conjure up such terrible memories. Are these analogous to the concentration camps?
Very, very similar. The Japanese did not practice direct genocide in the sense of ovens and burning of bodies and so on, but the Japanese did not care if every prisoner died, and 1 out of 3 did. So the trauma of that is held within these guys, and once they start talking, very often they can't stop. Some of my interviews went 3 days.
One of the similarities is also medical experimentation, human guinea pigs. We'll come back to that and some of the other things that could be found in the Japanese POW camps during World War II. The book is Prisoners of the Japanese POWs of World War II in the Pacific, published by Morrow. Gavin Dawes, its author, is my guest on New York & Company.
Hi, I'm David
Okay.
Brancaccio of Marketplace.
We moving right along
Business
here?
shows come at you from Wall Street in the executive suite. At Marketplace, we do talk about stocks and corporate shakeups, but we also talk about the latest changes on the job and at the supermarket. 'Cause at
Leonard, do you
Marketplace,
do
we know
one a
that
day,
numbers
2 a
that
day?
matter most
What's
to
your?
are
Do you
those
do
who
1 a
are
day, 2 a day?
checking
What's your
in
schedule for?
shows?
Yeah,
Join us
Or
each
guests?
weeknight at
Yes.
6:30 for news and
3 or 4
ideas
a
that
day.
affect
3 or 4 a
your
day,
life.
5 days a
Right
week.
here on WNYC,
You
AM
process an
822
enormous
Rock
number
Public
of
Radio.
Yes.
experiences.
Years
Yeah.
ago, there was a popular song about
I
the
do.
allure of faraway
And
places
just
with
why I have
strange
bags under
sounding
my
names.
eyes.
I'm Steve
I'm only
Delaney from
32
Monitor
years
Radio.
old, but
Right,
The name of things
right.
still sounds strange.
Worse than a
We
prison
know
camp.
that events happening in places like Kick Alley or Garage Day or
I don't
Movies
know,
show
it's,
affect our own lives. And at Monitor Radio,
it's
we
what I
pay
asked
attention to
for,
what goes
actually,
on in
so,
those not so far off places.
Self-inflicted
They're
wound.
increasingly
I
familiar
don't know if
names.
I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Join us
Well,
weekday
it sounds
mornings
good.
at 5 on
The
AM
interesting thing
820
is also
and
that you
FM
don't get to
93.9.
you don't
For
get
your first
narrowly
fix on what's
focused
going on
on
in places you
following
know
you. I'll be
and in
talking
places
about
we'll guide you to know.
New York during the 20s.
Manhattan in the 20s. Yeah.
And I was supposed to be talking to a novelist after that. She got sick, so she'll be on some later date. But a little bit of everything. Here we go.
My guest is Gavin Dawes, who spends half of his working life in the United States, the other half in his native Australia. He is the author of 9 books altogether. The best-selling History of Hawaii, Shoal of Time is one of those. Also has made documentary films. His latest is called Prisoners of the Japanese, POWs of World War II in the Pacific. It's published by Morrow. And we were talking about the similarities between the POW camps and the concentration camps. No ovens, yes, but little respect for human life. And along the lines of what the Nazis did, we have experimentation, medical experimentation. What kinds of things were they doing to these soldiers?
The whole litany of medical experiments of a lethal kind, deliberate inducement of disease, malaria, cholera, dysentery, anthrax, syphilis, plague, shooting living people to see what happened to the body when it's attacked by shrapnel, exotic things like subjecting people to high pressure in sealed chambers until their eyeballs pop out, boiling, freezing, dehydrating, the whole disgusting litany of that.
Bombarding them with X-rays.
Yeah. And the moral of that tale is very interesting in that this was known by the end of the war to, again, MacArthur. And MacArthur did not want any of the leading military scientists prosecuted as war criminals, as they should have been, just as the German
Now,
doctors were.
This is often presented as an example of MacArthur's wisdom. He wanted to create a stable post-war Japan and avoided some of the problems that we saw in Europe as a result. Japan still suffered for a while in its post-war recovery. You're suggesting that he should have been a bit more vindictive? He should have gone after these
Vindictive is hardly the word. I mean, humanely just. I would use that phrase. The fact is that none of them were ever prosecuted for that, and that was in return for a deal by which they turned over their information on biological and chemical warfare to the Americans. And that's the basis of a lot of the work at Fort Detrick in Maryland, for example, after the war. And that was a deal that MacArthur consciously made. The only ones of those military scientists ever prosecuted were prosecuted by the Russians in 1949-50. And the Russians used that as much as a propaganda trial to say that the Americans were morally despicable as it was a trial of war criminals.
It's interesting that as a result of World War II, the United States has been accused from all sides. I mean, we have our own shameful internment camps of the Japanese, and I think that they are one of the most terrible things we've ever done in this country, and yet, as terrible as they are, they pale in comparison to what was going on in Asia.
Well, they do indeed, and here again, there's quantitative evidence. If you look at the number of Japanese interned on the American mainland, it's over 100,000, so it's roughly comparable with the number of prisoners of the Japanese held in Asia. The death rate in the internment camps in the United States was no worse than the death rate for American civilians in the war years, and that's a pretty basic measure. Whereas in the Japanese prison camps in which these guys I talk about were confined, the death rate's 1 in 3, and the death rate is agonizing and atrocious and horrible. So there is a quantitative and also, I think, a moral difference in the treatment, in addition to which the United States government belatedly has paid each Japanese interned $20,000, whereas these prisoners, for 3.5 years of indescribable suffering, got, shortly after the war, $2.50 a day and were told to go home. And this is one of the reasons why they belatedly, 50 years later, are, in combination with the Comfort Women and others, suing the Japanese government for belated recognition and acknowledgement and secondarily compensation. They don't want the money. They would just like the Japanese government to say, we did a bad thing and we acknowledge that.
What did these guys survive on? Was it mostly just a bowl of rice and little else?
Mm-hmm.
Can rice sustain life?
No. You've got to be, your constitution has to be amazingly robust, and you've got to be, on top of everything else, amazingly lucky. If the war had gone on another 12 months, all the prisoners would have been dead.
In Germany, Allied bombing killed a fair number of POWs. We know about Slaughterhouse 5, for example. How many Allied men, and I imagine women, died at Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
There were prisoners under both bombs, POWs under both bombs, and this was known, and of course it was not a reason not to drop the bombs. They were not forborne to drop the bombs because there were hundreds and even thousands of prisoners within the radius of the possible damage. But at Hiroshima, very few. There were perhaps a dozen, 15 prisoners directly under the bomb. At Nagasaki, more, some scores. And that's not a very great number in comparison with Japanese deaths or deaths elsewhere.
Estimates about 60 to 80 people
like that
altogether.
At Nagasaki. But the other interesting thing is that those deaths were kept secret in the United States until the 1970s.
And you say that 200,000 Japanese died as a direct result of the bomb, although we could say a fair number died lingering deaths as time went on. 200,000 deaths compared to considerably more in the POW camps. Can we balance lives in that way?
Well, you can try, can't you? I mean, one life is worth as much as another life, and I've never been very good at doing moral statistics where there's maybe 6 zeros on the end of the figure. That's just my brain does not extend to that length of calculation. But what my public service announcement would be, I suppose, is that the prisoners as a group have been neglected by history and by government for 50 years. They're all old, they're going to die. As a matter of human meaning, it would be a good thing for powerful organisations like governments to take the time to say, yes, we remember you, we believe that terrible things happened to you, and on both sides of the Pacific we'd like to see that nothing like that ever happens again. And if that's done, then the prisoners can not die happy, that's impossible for them. They would die at least reconciled.
But they are very bitter?
99 out of 100 are. They love their country and they hate their government.
But what we did in Japan is not all that different from what we did in Germany, is it? We had a number of Nazi officials who were then enlisted to spy against the communists. Others were allowed to escape, in fact, helped to escape to South America. Here,